let you know we're going to finish up Acts by the end of May. So we are 3 weeks away to finishing up in Acts. We've been in Acts for over a year and a half. And so we'll be finishing up. Today we're going to take this journey by ship in two parts. This part this week and next week another part. And I want to share some things with you today. And I'm hoping that you will find yourself in the story. But more importantly, you'll find yourself in the answer. So we're going to get to that. So if you have your Bibles, turn with me now to Acts chapter 27, verse 1. Last week, what we did was we ended up with Paul, who has gone to Governor Festus and now King Agrippa, and has told the story. And he says, look, I want to go to see Caesar. I want to talk to Caesar. And so because of this, he now is going to be put on a ship to go to Caesar, all right? So what I want you guys to understand from this point, what we're going to do is that Paul knows that he's been told by Jesus that he is going to get to Rome. In that process, he has to go through this ship crossing, which becomes very eventful. So here we go. Oops. And when it was decided that we should sail for Italy, they delivered Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. So Julius is the name of the centurion. He most likely would have been a part of a cohort from the area of Syria. And their job is very simple: transport the prisoners to Rome. But when it says the word we up there, Luke gets to travel with them and probably some of Paul's friends as well. And by the way, Luke is going to tell this story from a first-hand perspective because he was a part of it. Verse 2. And embarking in a ship of Adramyttium, which maybe is an area, it's a city where this ship would have its home port, which was about to sail to the ports along the coast of Asia, we put to sea. Accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica. So this ship has people that are going to be on it that are basically going to take them. And their goal is just to get to Asia. This is going to be the first leg of their trip. They'll only be on this ship for the first part. The next day, we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul kindly and gave him leave to go to his friends and be cared for. Now, you need to understand something. Although Paul is under arrest, this is not in prison and jail, chain gang arrest. This would be more under like probation arrest. And he has made it very clear to Julius, he wants to get to Rome. It's easier to take a prisoner somewhere where he wants to go where you want to go. Does that make sense? So Paul wants to get to Rome. And so when he gets aside, he goes, hey, can I go visit some friends? Julius lets him go. They restock the ship. Paul comes back on, and off they go on to the next leg. And putting out to sea from there, we sailed under the lee of Cyprus because the winds were against us. And when we had sailed across the open sea along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra in Lycia. So let me show you by map what we're talking about. We start down here in Judea. He's going to get off here at Sidon. They're going to go around Cyprus because they're fighting the wind, go through Pamphylia, and they're going to end here in this place called Myra. Now, let me explain to you that a typical trip, if everything goes well, from Judea to Rome is 5 weeks. 5 weeks is how long it would take. And so what's happening is that in this process, their plan is, let's leave early enough because there's a season in which you do not travel on the Sea of Macedonia, in the Mediterranean Sea. I'll explain to that. This, by the way, from Myra is the course he should have taken. This is what you would have normally done. The red line shows the course that was actually taken. Obviously, there's a problem. Obviously, there's an issue, and we're going to get into that now. Verse 6. There the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing for Italy and put us on board. We sailed slowly for a number of days and arrived with difficulty off of Cnidus. And as the wind did not allow us to go farther, we sailed under the lee of Crete off of Salome. So what's happening is that typically what you would do is you tack and you fight, but they are literally making no progress. So basically, this is like a treadmill. This ship is trying to move forward because of the winds and how it's going. It's basically just sitting still. Their option is to go south, and they're going to go underneath the island of Crete, and in doing so, let the winds that would come off of Crete block them, and they can basically get to a place where they can make their next leg of the trip. Coasting along, with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens, near which was the city of Lycia. So you can see they go off to Cnidus. They can't go across. They go south. They're going down the opposite side of Crete, and they're getting to that place in the middle there called Fair Havens. Watch verse 9. It since much time had passed, so they've been fighting the wind the whole time. Remember, 5 weeks we get from here to Rome, but they've been fighting wind the whole time, so every time they fight wind, the days get longer. Had passed, and the voyages was now dangerous because even the fast was already over. So what you know is that the fast they're talking about is a fast that happens in mid-September. Let me explain to you. On the Mediterranean Sea, you do not, at this period of time, sail between the end of September through March because it is just so dangerous. The winds are completely unpredictable. And so all of the shipping happened between, obviously, the end of March through September. There becomes this point where you decide we can't go any farther because if you push it, you're going to run into danger. So it says, since much time had passed, and the voyage was now dangerous because even the fast was already over, Paul advised them, saying, Sirs, I perceive that the voyage will be with injury and much loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also of our lives. Now, here's what happens. Paul comes to the leaders and goes, we can't go forward. I'm just giving you some sound advice. Why is his advice sound? We find out in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 25. 2 Corinthians was written before this trip took place. Paul writes in verse 25, 3 times I was beaten with rods, once I was stoned, 3 times I was shipwrecked, and a night and a day I was adrift at sea. Paul's saying this, I know about shipwrecks. It's happened to me 3 times. I'm telling you, we shouldn't go forward. Parents, have you ever given your kids advice going, I've been here and done that, and I'm telling you, this is not what you should be doing? Anyone given that advice? Anyone received that advice? Oh, but do we know better? Yes, we know better. So he's looking at these guys going, remember this face. Shipwrecked 3 times. I'm telling you, we shouldn't go farther. Because here's what's interesting. It's about the cargo. This ship that came out of Alexandria was what they call a wheat ship. Wheat that came from the east and came to Rome was of high, high value. And by the way, this wheat issue will become an issue, and we'll actually finish it up next week. But what happens is that in this process, the decision, by the way, because all of the people on the ship know we're starting to flirt with danger, but it's a money issue. Watch what happens. So he says, but the centurion paid more attention to the pilot and the owner of the ship than what Paul said. Because the owner has this issue, watch. And because the harbor was not suitable to spend the winter in, the majority decided to put out to sea from there on the chance that somehow they could reach Phoenix. Now let me explain to you. Phoenix is 30 miles up the coast. It's not far. But it has a safer harbor. Because the issue is not their lives, we want this cargo to be safe. So we want to get it to a safer harbor, which means we're willing to risk our lives for the cargo. Folks, 30 miles. Paul's looking at going, this 30 miles is going to cost you. Because here's what I know. Have you ever noticed where you're like, this is good, but you're like, but if I just do a little bit more, just a little bit more, I'll just push it just a little bit more. Because usually that's either driven by finances or it's driven by desires. But in this, we now know we're going against what we should do to that which we want to do. And it's usually in that next push that things go wrong. And Paul is saying to them, look, you're worried about your cargo. I'm telling you this is about lives and cargo. We shouldn't leave. But they go, hey, if we get to this next port, just 30 miles up the coast, we can winter there, we'll be safer, and this cargo will be safer. Let's go for it. And that's what they do. A harbor of Crete facing both southwest and northwest, and spend the winter there. I wanted to show you the ship that they would be on. They've actually found wrecks in the bottom of the Mediterranean. They were able to get drawings, and they've recreated the ships that Paul would have been on at this time. This is what the ship would have looked like. So this is a recreation. You can see in the very bow, there's 3 men standing there. That gives you perspective of size. And the very bottom would be laid with all the wheat. The very middle would be cargo, different things that people would have taken on or had shipped, because just like we have things shipped, people would have things shipped. And then that middle box there is where people would sleep. So you would have on there the people that would be working the ship. You would have these prisoners. Obviously, you have this guy, Julius. One of the things you would do at this time is if you wanted to take a ship, you could either just pay your way, just the way we do like on a cruise line, or you could work your way. You could say, look, if I work my way, can I get on this ship and help you? And that's one of the ways that you would do this. So what you have is this ship is basically, they want to get it to a place where it's going to be safer, but they're going to risk everything that next 30 miles to do so. Verse 13. Now when the south wind blew gently, because that's their concern, they want to stay next to the island. Supposing they had attained their purpose, they weighed anchor and sailed along Crete, close to the shore. So they're going as close to the shore as they can to not hit the rocks, and they're trying to make it to Phoenix. But soon a tempestuous wind. That's where we get the word temper from, by the way. Tempestuous wind, called the northeaster, struck down from the land. And when the ship was caught and could not face the wind, we gave way to the wind and we were driven along. Here's the next thing I want to say to you. Now, this is a story of what happened to Paul, but I do believe from this point on, I want to say something to you. Folks, we use illustrations all the time about the storms of life, right? You feel like you're in a storm. And it's interesting to me that what happens when we get into a storm is that we start to miss the point. Now, here's the thing. They shouldn't have been out in the water in the first place, okay? So here's my story. By the way, remember, I love third service most, and you guys get the extra stories. I'm not kidding, because I don't have anywhere to be, so I can tell you other stories. Many of you guys know that I got lost in the mountains when I was a freshman in high school. I got really hurt. I had broken ribs, punctured lung, multiple concussions. And in that, every doctor and everyone who I've ever talked to said that I should have died on that mountain. Everyone has said I should have died on the mountain. And what's interesting is that this story talks to me because it was on Mount Baldy down south. And what happens is you get to this place we call the lodge. And literally from the lodge on a good day, it's 20 minutes to the peak, right? Just 20 minutes. We made every mistake. We left our packs there thinking we're just going to run up to the top, take a picture, and come back. That 20 minutes took us 2 hours. And we hit the top of Whiteout happened, and then I was lost for 48 hours and ended up falling into a frozen river. It goes on and on and on and on. But I will tell you, it's interesting when I hear this story how like we had gotten to this place. And folks, we had hiked, but we didn't make the peak, right? We didn't make the top. And we just had to do 20 minutes, but that 20 minutes cost me a lot. That 20 minutes caused me issues for years. That 20 minutes became 2 hours that became me broken and hurt and actually in some ways scarred from that experience. Cost me a lot. And it's interesting in that how things that would have mattered all of a sudden start to not matter. So let me explain to you. Running under the lee of the small island called Kata, we managed with difficulty to secure the ship's boat. So they had a little dinghy, so they bring it up, right? After hoisting it up, they used supports to undergird the ship. Then fearing that we would run aground in Syrtis, they lowered the gear, and thus we were driven along. So what they did was, they took the anchors, dropped them, and were hoping the anchors, as they bounced along the seabed, would slow them down because their fear is to land in this place called Syrtis. Let me show you where it's at. So they leave this place. There's Kata. You can see where they came to Kata. Syrtis is right here. It's this whole region that's right along this area. In the Mediterranean Sea, it's called the ship boneyard. The reason why, because the way the winds prevail here, most ships, if they were destroyed, hit this area called Syrtis. And what's interesting is their fear is this south wind, the southward wind, is driving them to where they know if they hit these rocks, we're done. So they drop their anchors, right? And they're drug along. This is what I know next thing. As soon as we know that we're in the storm, what do? We start dropping our anchors, right? We can't control what's going on, but we try to do whatever we can. We try to control things. We try to slow the situation down. We try to take the thing and try to take control. Look at the next thing that happened. Since we were violently storm-tossed, they began the next day to jettison the cargo. Jettison the cargo. Meaning, this is the stuff that people had paid them to transport. Why? Not my stuff. Right? What's the first thing we do in a storm? Your issues don't matter anymore. Right? All that matters is my issues. It's not my cargo, someone else's cargo. I don't care what's in the box. Off it goes. When I worked at UPS, you guys get all the good stories. When I worked at UPS, we had a situation that was a 5-gallon paint drum had exploded on the belt and literally covered, I'm not kidding, hundreds and thousands of packages in paint. So if you had just written the address of where it was going in pencil, all right? So let me tell you what you do. Write in pencil, put tape over the top of it. You'll get your package where it needs to go. Learn that lesson. But we had literally for weeks this pile of stuff that was covered in paint. We couldn't find out what the address was. We had to go to a judge and get a court order to open up every box to figure out what's in the side so maybe we can figure out where it goes to. Okay? But here's what's interesting. For us that were doing it, it's not my box, right? I'm not worried that it's sitting in the corner, but the person is going, where's my box? They're worried about it, right? I know what happens in a storm. What happens is that all of a sudden other people's issues in the middle of my storm don't become a big of an issue. And you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about when all of a sudden you're in a big storm and the things that you would normally care about stop mattering. And on the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. Now, what's the tackle? It's what you would have used to raise that other boat onto the deck. It's all the extra ropes. But let me tell you what this is. If you do, it's not like all of a sudden you start just throwing, go crazy, start throwing everything overboard. Every good ship's captain would have 2 of everything. Smart, right? If the rope breaks, you have an extra rope. If the thing breaks, you have another. So what's happening is, this is what they're doing. They're not throwing the tackle, meaning the stuff that's actually running the ship. They're throwing all the spare stuff over. Because guess what? If you're going down, the backups don't help. The backups don't help. So in our lives in storms, have you ever noticed that when you pack stuff at home, it makes sense to bring 5 suitcases when you're standing in your bedroom, right? Because I might need 17 pairs of shoes on this trip for 3 days. But when you've drug them around for a few days, right, they're not as important. It's amazing how priorities change as the situation gets more severe, right? Things that were, man, that's a priority, all of a sudden, not so much, right? So here's what I want to say to you. They started throwing the tackle because they're going, this is no longer a priority. This is dead weight. I don't need this anymore. This is the extra. Next. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and no small tempest lay on us, all hope of our being saved was at last abandoned. It's a very interesting phrase. All hope of our being saved was at last abandoned. Can I say it a different way that will maybe kind of enlighten it? When they realized they had done everything they could do, they stopped. It's very important that you grasp that. Because what happens is that you and I will fight and fight and fight because we want it to be about us. And what happened on this ship is what ultimately happens to us. We get to the point, there's nothing else I can do. I mean, we even believe if we hold our head a certain way that maybe something will change. But you come to that point of going, I can't do anymore. My effort is not going to change this. My actions are not going to change the direction this goes. And I want you to know that in my world, when God gets me there, then God goes, now I can deal with you. Now I can deal with you. Because I'm telling you, we want it to be that we fix it. We want it to be that we have the answer. And God goes, no, you need to rely on me, but you still think. And so when we've finally gotten rid of the tackle and we got rid of the cargo and we got rid of all this stuff, God goes, are you done? Are you done? Because that's what it says. all hope of our being saved was at last abandoned. Meaning, they just sat. They're being blown by this wind. They just sat. We can't do anything. Do you know that feeling? Do you know that feeling? I can't do anything. When Jody and I were planning InRoads, we said this story 100 times. Easter Sunday, we're sitting here. All the checks that the agency that brought us up here, they had bounced. We had no money in our checking account. We still had a home in Southern California, had a home up here. We're on Easter Sunday going, God, we don't know. But we trust you. And that day, he blessed us. But we had to get to that point where we couldn't do anymore. We couldn't hawk anymore. Ben was sleeping in our closet. That was his bedroom. Verse 21. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul stood up among them and said, I love this. Men, you should have listened to me and not have set sail for Crete and incurred this injury and loss. I know you're not supposed to tell I told you so, but Paul does, all right? Remember me? I'm the guy that told you not to go. Shipwrecked 3 times, heading for number 4. Okay? Okay. Yet, now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only the ship. Now here's what's interesting. That whole crew, everyone on that ship is now at a place they're ready to listen. No one else is bringing up any good ideas. No one else has anything else. They're still getting blown. And Paul goes, listen, take heart. Take heart. There will be no loss of life among you. Verse 23, for this very night there stood before me an angel of God to whom I belong and to whom I worship. And he said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar. And behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you. He goes, look, he says, I'm going to talk to Caesar, and guess what? You all get to be saved because I have to go talk to Caesar. I want to say a couple things to you. There's a difference in this story of Jesus and Paul. Jesus in this situation does what? Calms the waves. What does Paul do? He believes the promises. Folks, you and I need to be like Paul. We, in these situations, want the situation to go away. We want the seas to be calm. We need to be more like Paul, listen, who believes the promises. The promise, Paul, you're going to Caesar. Therefore, all these guys get saved. That's your focus. Let me say something else to you. This week I was challenged. Many of you want to be in God's Word. Many of you feel guilty because you're not in God's Word. You should have a better quiet time, whatever that situation is. Let me put a carrot on a stick for you. When I was at the ranch, when I was working with troubled teenagers, God laid on my heart to do something, and it was this. He said, Jeff, you need to know my promises. Because this is what I know. If you don't believe the promises of God, you will rely on your own fears. Listen to me. If you don't believe the promises of God, you will rely on your own fears. Because we work mainly out of fears, folks. We work mainly out of reactions of things. But in this passage, and I just picked a section. So what I did when I was there is every time I would do my quiet time, I just said, if it's a promise, I'm going to mark it in blue. So I just started going through the Bible, and anytime there was a promise, I just marked it in blue. Just marked it in blue. And so, and it was interesting. Chapter after chapter, I would find these promises, and I just mark them in blue. And throughout my life, this was my Bible for years until I went to the technology stuff. But for years, there were days where I just needed to read blue. Do you hear me? I just needed to read blue. I needed to hear there's promises, because when you don't know the promises, you get in trouble. I needed to hear that if he can feed the birds of the air, he can feed me. If he can clothe the hills with flowers, he can clothe me. He has promise after promise after promise after promise that he is faithful to. And my statement to you is that you believe the promises, but if you're not in God's word, guess what? You're not going to hear the promises. Paul's only thing is his faith in God and that God is faithful to his promise. That's his only message to these men. Watch this. And he said, do not be afraid. Paul must stand before Caesar, and behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you. So take heart, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have been told. Now, here's something you need to grasp. We, as followers of Christ, need to know that Christ is faithful. God is faithful, but you need to claim his faithfulness before he is faithful. Let me say that again. You need to claim his faithfulness before he is faithful, so that when he is faithful, he gets the glory and not you. And so in job loss, in sickness, in issues, claim his faithfulness, claim his promise. So when those around you watch and God is faithful, then he gets the glory. Because I'm telling you, there have been so many times where Jody and I have been able to say, we've gone through things and said, but God is faithful, he is faithful. And then when he is faithful, we get to go, see, this is the God we serve. And that's what Paul is saying. He goes, look, my God is faithful. Now listen to me. I'm going to read a phrase to you, and it's not even going to hit you, but I'm going to tell you, I'm going to make it hit you. Here we go. But we must run aground on some island. Now that doesn't do anything for you. Like, okay. No, you don't get it. The men that he said this to went, right. Sure. You know why? I know your mind's not blown yet, but here comes the blowing. Here we go. The Mediterranean is 962,000 square miles. Almost 1 million square miles of water. Now, the problem we have with this is that many of you can't fathom that. And so I went on to Wolfram Alpha, if you know what that is, and I figured some things out, and this is what I want to show you. I asked, how many states is 962,000 square miles? Folks, I've driven across Texas and felt like it would never end, all right? And that's going like 80 miles an hour. Praying for it to be over. But folks, that's how big. So let me explain to you. Paul stands before these guys and goes, hey guys, we got to hit an island. Let me show you the next map. There's only one island. It's down the left-hand corner where it says Malta. That's the one island in this region. And we got to hit it. This is Malta. It is 95 square miles. So Paul stands before ship's pilots and sailors and goes, hey guys, my God is going to save us, but we got to hit an island. One island. In this area, they got to hit it. This is Malta. It is 95 square miles. And they've got to hit it. You know how big 95 square miles is? It's not big, folks. So here's what because I need perspective. Because Paul stands before guys who have been in the sea, pilots, workers on the ship, and goes, by the way, guys, we got to hit an island. And I'm sure they're going, right. We're going to hit a continent before we hit an island. And they're looking, they're going, I know where we left, our only island, and we're not being blown by Crete anymore. We're going the opposite direction. So I said, how far is this? From Phoenix to Malta, because they almost made it to Phoenix. It's 598 miles if you go straight there, which they didn't go straight there. 598 miles if they went straight there. So I said, okay, perspective, what's 598 miles? This is 598 miles. San Francisco to Salt Lake City. Now you can drive it at 80 miles an hour in one day. All right? But if you're on a ship, which, by the way, that goes probably about 3 miles an hour, with winds. So here's what I want you to understand. But we must run aground on some island. Does that now have perspective? So here's what I want to say to you. Paul stands up and says to these people on this ship, I know we're in a place that's about 1 million square miles, and we got to hit one island that's 95 square miles, and by the way, it's 600 miles away, but my God is faithful. My God is faithful. And when they got rid of the cargo and they got rid of the tackle and they had done everything they could, Paul stands up and goes, my God has promised that I'm going to go to Rome. And my God says I'm going to hit an island. And guess what? They did. So why am I telling you this? Folks, can I just say to you in this concept, your God is faithful. Your God is faithful. And he has an island for you to hit. And you are going, it's so far away, and I can't even imagine, and the sea goes on forever, and I can't see an end. And God goes, yeah, have you gotten rid of everything else that you rely on? And is it just me and you? Because if it's just me and you, then I can take you to the island that you're supposed to go to. Folks, storms are not God's punishment. Storms in your life are not God's way of saying, how do I mess with you? Storms are a way that he says, I'm faithful. I'm faithful. There are times in my life where God goes, Jeff, I'm going to take everything. I'm going to take everything. And when he did, that's when I went, oh, that's what I get. And the thing is that he is faithful. There are things that I look back on and go, there is no way. But it had to be me taking my hand off the wheel or my hand off the rudder and saying, God, I trust you. But the only way I trusted him was to read his promises. When he says, if I can feed the birds of the air, I can feed you. If I can clothe the hillsides, I can clothe you. Why do you spin? Why do you worry? I know what is good for you. I have plans for you. I have things that I want to do with you. And when I read and I get to a place that is you read it and you go, God, you've promised and you are faithful. In his word, over and over again, he promises and he is faithful. And therefore, I can go today and go, this is what I got. And if this is what I got to do is be on this ship going, okay, God, what are you going to do? Then I'm on this ship because if I've done everything that I can do, I've thrown the tackle off, I've done everything else, I just trust him. And that's when he does it. I told you, I've used it way too many times. Jody and I here in Fremont, Easter Sunday, we are months away from launching a church. All the money is gone. Checks that were sent to us by the organization that brought us are bouncing. We have no money to buy diapers, and we're going, God, what? Our house back in Southern California did not sell. We're making double payments. We have no money. We're breaking into Easter eggs to buy diapers. And God goes, now, I can do something. And I can tell you, from that moment, God has been faithful. That day he answered those questions. But we got to the point where, God, we can't do anything else. He goes, okay, good. Let me show you what I want to do. And he blessed and blessed and blessed and blessed. Folks, and what I mean is not even financial. He blessed us with people. He blessed us with encouragement. But we had to get us to that point that we've done everything, and we felt like we were like, what else do you want us to do? I think that what I want to tell you in this story is that Paul, the only voice that speaks up and goes, hey guys, my God says we're going to be okay. Now, here's my last bit of encouragement. In the middle of the storm, you need to hear me. in the middle of the storm, with the people around you, you need to claim God's faithfulness before he's faithful. So that when he is faithful, he gets the glory and not you. Before he's faithful, you need to claim his faithfulness. Because you need the people around you to go, you said your God would be faithful, and he is. Because that's what Paul did. My God is faithful. And when they hit the only island in the region, 600 miles away, I believe they thought that Paul's God was faithful. So what happens in the middle of the storm? You go back to James. You pray continually. You give thanks in all circumstances. And you rejoice in God. Why? Because he's faithful. Because he's faithful. I've watched people be faithful, show God's faithfulness in the middle of their cancer. I've seen people show God's faithfulness in the middle of their job loss. I've seen show God's faithfulness in the middle of the loss of a loved one. I've seen people show God's faithfulness, and they speak that my God is faithful. And when he is, people step back and go, wow. So here's what I have for you. Next week, we're going to take the second part of this journey, and we're going to deal with this wheat in the bottom of the boat next week. We'll save that for next week. But I want to share with you that how are you when God says, we got to run up against an island? Because I know in your perspective, you're like, I don't see an island. I don't get it. And yet, he is faithful. And with that, let me pray for you.